Hey, welcome to Strickland's and Friends.
Today we're making a winter squash stew with collard greens because it's November and winter squash and collard greens are in season, and we're all about cooking seasonally here at Strickland's and Friends.
Even November's a great month for seasonal cooking.
Especially for winter squash and collard greens. So we came up with this recipe last year after we went out for a walk and we saw that one of our neighbors had thrown away a whole bunch of, well, they were sitting out by the curb. They weren't in the actual trash can, but they were sitting by the curb.
I'm sure they were like me. They thought they had this great Thanksgiving display of like 12 different colors of pumpkin.
And so they had a kaboka squash like this one, and they had some other squashes, but they had just set them out by the curb. And so
we're walking by. I'm like, hey, what's that?
That's a kaboka squash. Let's take it home and eat it. And so we did. And so yes, we took food off the curb. Anyway, so you can use any kind of winter squash with this recipe. This is a kaboka squash. And you could also use a butternut squash if you would prefer. And you could also use acorn squash. Well, you might need more than one acorn squash because you need about 3 or more cups of it cut up. And this one, while it is an acorn squash, it is not enough. So you probably need 2 or 3 of these.
You could use pumpkin.
You could use pumpkin. You could use a turban squash. There's all kinds of different squashes, winter squashes out there. So one of the cool tricks that I have learned recently about cutting up one of these big squashes, well, first of all, I make him do it. But the other trick is that if you just put it in the microwave for a couple of minutes, it softens it up and it's easier to cut through. So this one has already been nuked for a couple of minutes. Now, before you do that, make sure you wash it really well and get any dirt off of it. Because sometimes dirt will have minerals in it that will cause sparks in the microwave. And you don't want to do that. So make sure you wash it really well. So I have already...
I want to do it.
You do? Doesn't seem like a good idea, but okay. So anyway, you're like a pyromaniac.
That sounds cool.
Oh, fun. Okay, so this is just slightly warm still because we nuked it for just a couple of minutes, but it should make it easier to cut through. And we will let him do his surgery on the... Dr. Strickland, do your surgery.
So if you want to see the cutting up the squash, just click on that video right there. So now we've got the cut up kaboka squash.
Right. And so what we need next is 1 onion cut up that I've already peeled. It's a yellow onion, and 3 cloves of garlic minced. And since Dr. Strickland here is my sous chef, we're just going to let him cut that up. And it can...
So I'll cut off the end.
Yep.
Then I'll cut it from here. What do you want it, diced?
Diced, that would be great. And I'm going to go ahead and heat up the pot that we're cooking in.
Perfect.
So I have the pot starting to heat over medium to medium-high heat. We don't want it too hot. And then once these are cut up, you could actually just go ahead and throw it in the pot. I like how you're keeping your fingers very nicely out of the way.
Still got 10.
You still got 10. That's a good thing. Take that big chunk. Thank you. To the compost. So it doesn't matter if it's perfect because it's actually going to get all pureed up. So
oh, really?
I have that one little...
Now you tell me.
Yeah. All right. What's wrong with that piece? Oh, that's the core.
Remember when we learned to breathe through your mouth instead of your nose when cutting onions?
Oh, yeah.
I forgot to do it.
Forgot. Oh, no. Are you crying? Okay. So we have this really cool, handy-dandy little... it's a garlic chopper that I think the company is Xylus that makes it. It's really cool. There's a very sharp little blade inside of this thing. So... And it can come out, so you can see what that looks like. Pull it straight out there. And so there's these little blades that spin round and round. And it goes inside this little thing that catches the minced garlic. So we're just going to put that right back in there. Okay. And then you open the trap doors on this side. It kind of looks like something you'd see on another planet.
Yeah, but we had it a few
Marged
months
over.
before I knew that you could remove those wheels and the
Oh, no.
blade like that. It's the key is
You
that
can
the
clean it.
grades have to be the blades have to be pointing straight up to get
Yep.
that done.
Exactly. Okay, so we're going to put 3 cloves of garlic. Probably cut them in half first.
And on the side it says chef apostrophe N, chefin.
Chefin. Okay, I thought it was xylus. Maybe not. Okay. If we can figure out where we found it, we'll put the link.
So it's got these little doors. You pop the garlic in. I think we're gonna have to cut it in half.
No, I always cut it in half
You do?
first.
Okay.
And I don't know that they're all going to fit at the same time, but we can try. I don't think so. They're not all going to fit. So let's go about half of it. And then you put the little wheels down and cool. It's garlicky.
It sure is.
Do love garlic though. All right, so that's about 3 cloves of garlic. So what we're going to do now that the pan is nice and hot is I'm going to go ahead and dump in the onion. And we'll start cooking that.
Change cameras now.
So you notice I didn't put any oil in. I am using water to do a water saute.
So this is on medium-high heat.
Medium high, and it's a water saute. And they've been cooking, we're just trying to get them to where they're translucent. And they're just about there. Sure smells good. I love the smell of cooking onions, don't you?
Yep.
Yum. All right. And I think they're pretty translucent. So now I'm going to add all that garlic. And we'll let that cook for just about 30 seconds. There. A little more water. Okay. Oh, it smells so good. I love the smell of cooking garlic.
It's hard to believe how good a job that little garlic mincer does.
It's crazy, isn't it? Okay, and you don't have to get your hands all garlicky. Okay, so we have that going for about, that's 30 seconds. Okay, then we're going to add in all that squash that you cut up. And I've already set aside about 3 cups worth of this broth. So it's a vegetable broth, but it's made of, it's totally plant-based. It's a vegan vegetable broth that tastes like chicken. What I'm using is Better Than Bouillon, and you can find it on Amazon. We found this one at Whole Foods. But it says Better Than Bouillon, no chicken base. And to reduce the sodium, instead of preparing it like it says on the package, on here it says to do 1 cup of boiling water to 1 teaspoon of the bouillon paste. But what we're doing instead is about a half a teaspoon of the bouillon paste, and that cuts the sodium down by about half. So
that's what was in this little...
That's what was in that pot, was all the...
It was already hot?
I already heated it up, yeah, so that'll help. And then we're bringing it up to a boil.
And this has been on medium-high heat all along.
Yes,
But now you're turning
I just turned it up to high because I'm bringing it to a boil.
Cool.
So what we're adding now is some thyme. And I put the thyme bottle away, but this is the dried seasoning thyme, so it is actually 1 whole tablespoon of thyme, or you could do 2 whole tablespoons of fresh thyme, which I think we do have some fresh thyme. We could have gotten that too, but oh well. All right, so we have a tablespoon of dried. Most people don't have thyme growing in their backyard, so we'll just go with the tablespoon of dried thyme. We have it growing in a pot because it will take over and grow like a weed everywhere, so... Doesn't that smell good? It already smells really good. All right, so we're trying to bring it up to a boil. Just set that aside. So We've added the squash, the broth, and the thyme. That's it so far. And then once that comes to a boil, we'll bring it back down to just a simmer, and then we'll put the lid on it. That'll actually help keep the heat in. But after it comes to a boil, we're going to switch, and I'm going to move this pan over here, and we'll cook the collard greens. And there's a reason we're not cooking the collard greens in the soup, and I'll show you in just a minute.
Okay, so it's on high until it boils, and then when you bring it to simmer, what temperature do you have it at?
Once it comes down to a simmer, we'll take it down to like medium-low.
Medium-low? And
just let it simmer for about 10 minutes until the pieces of the kabocha squash are very, very tender. And that's what we're going for. So we'll see if it actually takes 10 minutes. In theory, it'll take 10 minutes. Might take more than that, we'll see. But it depends on how the age of the squash. From what I can tell, I have figured out sometimes when a squash is old, it tends to cook much faster, versus a newer squash that was just picked. They tend to take a little bit longer to cook. I'm not really sure how that works, but why that is. If anybody knows, leave a comment. I don't know, but I think...
when our butternut squash get old, they're really light. That probably means they lose a lot of their fluid.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. Yeah. So probably
just because there's less mass in there, it would take less to heat it up.
Right, and less to cook it through.
Yep.
Because it starts to get kind of like porous.
Yep.
So yeah, that would make sense. So the younger, newer squash, the one that was just picked and maybe it wasn't, completely ripe, or it was just getting ripe when it was picked, maybe that is why it takes longer. So we'll see. Okay, so it's coming up to a boil. So what I'm going to do is reduce that heat way down to medium-low and put a lid on it. And then we're going to switch. So when you pick this pan up, I'll move that one over there. There we go. And then, here we go. So now what we're going to cook, while that's simmering over here on the other burner, we're going to do the collard greens. Because you want the collard greens to cook separately first, and then add them to the soup. The reason is, once that soup is cooked, we're going to take an immersion blender and put it in there and blend it all up. And I don't want to blend up the collard greens.
Okay.
So we'll just make that part really creamy, and then add the cooked collard greens. Also, because when we make collard greens at our house, we always use parts of the more tender stem from the collards, because I don't want to lose all that good fiber and all those nutrients. And so I save not the real woody parts at the bottom, but the rest of it from the middle, and I dice it all up. So we're going to add that to the burner, and I'll heat it back up to medium-high. And I have saved aside a little bit of vegetable broth. And so we're going to cook this in vegetable broth. So with the other part, I cooked it in water, just water, no oil. And then for this part, we're going to cook it with just some vegetable broth. So we'll let that saute for just a little bit. It's already sizzling. So we'll just get those cooking until they're a little bit more tender.
So you've got the heat on the 9.
Well, about a medium.
Medium
it's
high?
a medium high. Yeah. Okay, so we'll let that simmer for just a minute and let those stems get tender. And if the liquid starts to evaporate out before they're tender, and I need more liquid, you can just add water or more vegetable broth. So actually, I think I'm going to get more water to put in there.
The more vegetable broth you add, the more salt you're adding, and the less healthy the dish is, right?
Exactly. Which is why I'm adding water next time. So, so yeah. But I just cooked that with water, and then lower sodium vegetable broth. Oh, yeah, we'll just use this instead. There we go. So that'll take just a couple of minutes to simmer, but collard greens are one of my favorite vegetables because they're really cool. In Alabama, they grow actually during the summer too. So we can eat collard greens in the summer and the winter here, which is wonderful. But collard greens have a huge amount of calcium in them. So I just love eating collard greens for the nutrients. They are a They're a green leafy vegetable, but they're also cruciferous. They're related to broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts, the other cruciferous vegetables.
Is spinach cruciferous?
No, spinach is not cruciferous.
So that's what makes, perhaps that's part of what makes the difference, that spinach has calcium, but it won't let you have it?
Right, that's because of the oxalic acid. So spinach has oxalic acid in it, and so there is calcium in spinach, but spinach is kind of a stingy vegetable, and it won't let you have the calcium, and that's because the oxalic acid in the spinach blocks our ability to absorb the calcium. We do, from spinach, get iron and vitamin A and some vitamin C. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit so it doesn't cook too much.
Yeah, so the idea that spinach and collards are in different families helps, really kind of helps make that make sense, doesn't it?
Right, so spinach, if you think about, like, if you eat a raw spinach salad, you know how it feels kind of squeaky on your teeth? That's because of the oxalic acid. So, and then even cooked spinach does that too. I've noticed sometimes it'll have this kind of squeaky feel against your teeth. That's the oxalic acid. And it's the oxalic acid that keeps you from being able to absorb the calcium that's in that spinach. But collard greens don't have oxalic acid. You know what other vegetable does have oxalic acid? Swiss chard. Think about that. Swiss chard and spinach are more similar, right? The leaves are more tender, where this is a more tough leaf. This is, you know, like kale is it's a leafy green, but it's also a cruciferous. And it also has a lot of calcium and a lot of vitamin A and a lot of fiber and a lot of, kale's super good for you. Collard greens are more popular here in the South. And it took me a while to get to where I liked collard greens, but I actually really love them now. At first I thought, ugh. But you know why? It's because when we first moved here and we started eating collard greens, they were always just really overcooked. They were cooked until they weren't really even green anymore because they had cooked all day. And basically, you're losing all those nutrients in the steam. It's just going right out. So, and if it's not bright green anymore, it's probably not good for you anymore. You lost a whole lot of those vitamins. So we're just going to cook this. Still going to be bright green. That looks pretty good. It's getting there. Okay, now I'm going to add these. This is one whole bunch of collard greens that I already cut up.
So you decided it was time just because they're this nice bright green and...
They're bright green and they look like they're starting to get a little soft. And that's what we want. We don't want them still hard and crunchy. Maybe a little crunch, but not too much. And then we'll add all of these greens to the pan. And I'm going to add a little bit more water. And then I have these. They were from using the wok. It's like Chinese cooking sticks. But I like them because they help me flip things over easily. So we want to get all of it to the heat.
So your temperature's at a 6 now.
Yeah, we could probably turn it up just a pinch.
So you turned it up to an 8. Pretty much.
Yeah, it's medium to medium high. I'm not putting anything on super high and, scorching it. I just want it to get cooked, not burned or scorched to the bottom of the pan. Starting to look really pretty. We just want it to get wilty and tender. And it can cook longer in the soup, too. That's fun.
That's already looking good. Mm-hmm. That's fast.
It was. Well, they're greens, so they don't take very long to cook. Unless you, do like most people do and let them just cook and cook until you just cook the snot out of them and then they're not.
So if we were just having these as a side dish, we'd probably take them up now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think they're pretty much done.
Okay.
So I am going to turn the heat off under here and we're going to check on our squash and see how it's doing over here.
I'm going to move this back and I'm going to bring the soup forward.
Perfect. Turn that back up. Turn the other burner off. Turn the other burner off.
So we're keeping the squash at
Keep the lid on.
about a 5,
Yep.
medium heat.
Okay, so we want the lid back on. Still not done, and it hasn't been quite 10 minutes yet. So we're going to let that just cook a little bit longer. I'm going to turn that one off. And we'll let that cook for just a little bit longer.
So it's been 13 minutes since we shut off the cameras.
Which means it's probably been about 15 or 16 minutes that it's been cooking. And you'll know that the squash is ready if you can take a spoon and smash a piece of it up against the side, and it smashes. Yes, it does. Look at that.
Smash against that side.
Smash right there. Okay, there we go. So you can see that it is soft and tender. So what I'm going to do is take an immersion blender. Oh yeah, it's definitely tender. Okay, so I'm going to take an immersion blender, and remember we already cooked the collards, but we don't want them to get pureed up. So we're going to take the immersion blender and turn the heat way down and put this in and blend it up. You could leave some chunks of squash. I think that would be really good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be completely pureed, but it does make it a nice creamy soup to use the immersion blender.
Now, if you didn't have an immersion blender, what would you do?
You could put it in a regular blender. You may want to cool it down a little bit first. If you have a plastic pitcher on your blender or a blender that can't handle high heat, then you could put it in a blender.
So glass blenders are glass partly so they can handle heat?
That is one of the reasons. A Vitamix like we have actually does handle the high heat because it has that soup setting on it, so it would be fine. Alright, so we'll leave a few little chunks of it in there. I think that'd be really good. Okay, so one of the best parts of this soup is you could add, it's nutritional yeast, 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast. I could have added that before we blended or after. It doesn't really matter in what order you add the nutritional yeast, but we're going to add that in and stir it in because okay, because you know nutritional yeast is like catnip for vegans, as they say. So it is some good stuff. And it gives everything that nice cheesy, rich, deep umami flavor. So, and as we figured out today, nutritional yeast is
It's part of the 5th food group. It's a fungus.
It's a fungus. It is not an animal and it is not a plant. It is a fungus. Very cool. Okay, so I've got that all mixed up. And then, now for the last part, we're taking our cooked collard greens and adding them right back in. There we go. And then, don't want to leave any in the pan. We want to eat them all because they're so good. There's more. Okay. And we'll stir them all in. Oh, that looks so good, doesn't it? Yum. Yum, 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 yum. Okay. It's not pretty. It's not a pretty soup, but it's delicious though. Okay. I wouldn't say it's very photogenic, but it's, it is good stuff. All right. And then we'll add some fresh cracked pepper.
Like, having had it before, it looks really tasty to me.
Right, because we know how good it is, but looking at it, as someone who might not have eaten it before, it's doesn't necessarily look like it's all that attractive, but it is really good stuff. It tastes fabulous. All right, and you notice I didn't add any salt in because the vegetable broth already has salt in it. So I don't really think it would need salt. There are some people I know who think everything needs salt, so they'd probably salt it. But, you know, if you're on a low sodium diet, definitely no need to salt this. It has loads of flavor. All right, and it is done. So, yum! Dinner's ready.
Thank you,
You
honey.
excited?
Very.
All right. So we'll serve that up maybe with some of those good Sammy's crackers or something, and it's dinner.
Yep.
Yay! Thanks for watching.